a part of publishing plans I don't hear a lot of talk about is the exit plan, and
Oh,
which has been on my mind a lot because I write also in a very niche genre called JAF, Jane Austen fan fiction. And while it has been lucrative, it's not where my heart is. And I'm wondering, how do you develop an exit plan when you have a suite of pen names, maybe 30, 40 books, and you just, I don't want to deal with it. Or maybe you're like Kelly.
so you mean an exit plan from like a particular genre, not from writing itself, right?
Or an exit plan from your day job. Is that what you're saying, Emma? Right?
Maybe you want an exit plan because you have decided I'm gonna let some of the pressure come off publishing, and you've got a wonderful day job now. Yeah, it's like you can't manage 3 or 4 pen names. So what do you do when you want to deliberately? Because we talk a lot about expansion, but what if you
Sure. That's a
deliberately?
good question. I mean, I haven't done it, so I don't know. I'm kind of going off of like my feelings here because I only have two, one, my real name and a pen name. So I don't have a ton of pen names to wrangle or manage. But, I mean, I try to be honest with my readers. Like, so for instance, under my sci-fi pen name, I have two different sci-fi series. One is the space fantasy and one is a sort of more traditional space opera. And so I did a survey, I did a poll like, hey, which would you like to see next? Like another book in this series or another book in this series? And the space fantasy series was the lowest. So I said, okay, like, it's probably going to take me some time. I'm going to be working in thrillers right now, and it'll take me maybe a year before I get back to sci-fi. But when I do, I'll focus on this series. And I kind of just let them know like what's going on so that no one's, holding out hope for another book that's not going to come for a long time. But that's sort of the closest I've come to that because I haven't closed down any pen names yet. Jack, have you done anything like that or?
No, no, not exactly. I think, but what my gut tells me, is that if you are like actually done with it and you're moving on, it feels like you need to write one final love letter to it, whether that is like wrapping up. Like I think the worst case scenario would be just like any TV show, where like Firefly,
Right.
you know, oh, right. The pain that people feel, or like Futurama, right? These other TV shows that come to mind that they get cut, partway through and people aren't done with them yet, and the frustration that they feel and the pain. That's the thing that I would make sure that you've tied up all those loose ends if you have. If that means you need to take some time, take stock of things and write one final, book, that's kind of to cap everything off, that gives you closure as well. Just coming from that perspective, that's my thought on it. But then yeah, communicate with your readers too. If your pen names are all, out in the open, and you're going to let your readers know, I'm moving on from this genre, I'm not writing in that one for the foreseeable future, communicate that clearly. And I think that's, then as long as you're at peace with it, I think
I think
that's.
obviously one thing, so when you're writing series, another kind of decision you need to make up front that probably affects this a lot is, are you writing an episodic series or are you writing a, continuous story? And so all of my books to date have been episodic in the sense that, so for the space fantasy series, for example, they're like Conan. Like if you've read the Conan books, each book stands on its own. There may be one or two characters that pop up here and there that you've met before, but there's no overarching story. He's fighting this enemy in this book, and this enemy in this book, and this monster in this book. And that's the way the space fantasy series went. So when I wrote the last book, there weren't, it's not like if you stopped there, you wouldn't be thinking, oh my God, how does the story end? Because the story, that particular story does end. But I did, I did, like you said, not that I won't write any more of those, but I had a feeling it might be a while before I did. So I tried to wrap up whatever tiny threads there were, So for instance, in that series, there was a background plot where he has this mentor who trained him to fight like in the arena. In book 1, he thinks that this guy is dead. But in book 2, he finds out he's really alive. And so he's trying to find him throughout the book. So in book 4, he finds him. And that's part of the story of book 4 so that that bit of it is wrapped up.
Yeah.
I certainly could write more books in that series if I wanted to, but there's no, you could introduce new plot threads and things, but that particular background plot was, I made sure to wrap it up since I'm like, I'm probably not going to be back to this for a year or two. So
Yeah. Yeah. There you go, Emma. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I think you said you have 40 books in that. Is that just
4,
your
no,
spin-off?
4, just 4.
Oh, no, for Emma. I thought
Oh,
you said it
Emma.
was 30 or
Oh.
40 books in that subgenre, or that
Yeah.
in the Jane Austen fan fiction.
About
But-
6 names and about 30. They're novellas, mostly novellas.
I'm going to also offer a counterpoint to what Jack and I just said, in that I think a lot of that depends on, are the books like at least kind of breaking even? I mean, if you're losing money on a series where literally just the costs of editing and the covers, and you're not making that back, and it is like an albatross around your neck, I think at the end of the day, you have to decide what's best for your own well-being. And, yes, it's nice to kind of cap things off, but if you feel like you're just underwater and you can't do it, I also think it's a valid decision to say, I just have to stop this, maybe 6 months down the road, you can explain to readers that like you're taking a break, or maybe once you take a breather, you'll get some ideas for how to cap things off. But I don't think it's all degrees, right? Like I enjoyed writing that space fantasy series, even though it wasn't doing great, but I also didn't feel like it was like siphoning money out of my pocket. If I did, I think it's perfectly valid to just say, I just have to stop this. I have to move on to something else. Like you don't have to torture yourself. And you can explain to readers or not explain to readers, but it all depends on how that is sitting in your portfolio.
I think that's really, sorry.
It's more of an energy penny thing that we talk about a lot, especially me and Kelly having, transitioning into BookFunnel. It's more of, they're just sitting there, and I know I don't want to write anymore. Oh, I'm getting free coaching. And I know if I leaned into BookFunnel and some other low-cost solution, they could be selling a lot more, but my heart and my energy is just not in it. So I'm like, what do you do when you're in that situation? Because a part of you is like, well, these could be making more money if you just put in the energy pennies, but you're like, I don't know,
We
man.
got so much energy, right? I mean, it's a finite resource. And that's why I say, like, I think you have to assess it and decide for yourself, like, do I have it in me to close this off or to continue it, or do I just need to like shut this away for now? Like I just can't.
Even if you're not adding to it, just to promote it is going to cost time and energy. And if you can just leave it there sitting on the shelf and it brings in some, I don't know what organic amount of traffic it gets on its own and what it brings in without you promoting it at all. But it's kind of like, hey, if it buys you a coffee every now and then and you don't have to spend your energy on it, I wouldn't feel guilty about that. You're solved.
Ties into something Kelly was saying. Was that you who brought this up the last podcast, Kelly? I think you were saying to start out as you mean to go on. And that ties into the whole publishing plan thing too, because what do you want to be writing in 5 to 10 years? And if I had asked myself that, no, not Jeff. I mean, it served its purpose. But think long term.
Well, I mean, you have to think about like the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where you have, I've put so much into this, so I have to keep going. There's so much time, so much money, so much energy has been put into a project, and whether it's a series or a new pending, whatever. And we get to this point where we're like, but I've gone so far, I have to keep going. And now I'm throwing more money at something I'm not enjoying anymore. I'm not, that sort of thing. And so I think that's one of the things where you have a big backlist of these novellas, and I think they can still manage themselves. You don't have to put a ton of energy into, I mean, people who love that genre are going to look for them. So you're probably still going to make sales. So, I mean, it is like, if you have the time and the energy to do them, wrap it up. If you feel like you've left a lot of loose ends, but if you haven't, there's nothing wrong with stepping away and saying, this isn't working, and I'm okay with the, like, just letting this sit. And you don't have to make it forever too. Maybe in a year, 2, 3 years, you'll be like, you know what? I got a really great idea for the next part of this fan fiction piece that I want to do. And then you write it.
or Jane Austen fan fiction comes back in vogue and everybody's talking about it, and now you're like, hey, you know,
Yeah. And you have your backlist that you can start putting some money to, and it's there. So yeah, I think with if your readers, if you do have like some like cliffies, that I always say, like if you have a cliffhanger, maybe even just a novella or something really short to wrap up that series. But yeah, I mean, if they're standalones, I think, there's nothing wrong with just stepping back a bit from that series. And
Or yeah, and you can even let readers know, like, hey, I know there's some cliffhangers here, but I just want everyone to be aware I'm stepping away from this series, focusing on this for the time being. Just and then they won't be waiting for it. Look, you can never please all the people all the time, right? So of course some people won't like that, but it's your business, it's your books. You have to do what is best for yourself. Like writing a book out of a sense of obligation, I just don't think is a good idea.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is Emma. This is something we'll have to keep tabs on in the coming episodes to see how you're moving on from that. Just like we have Kelly's reader magnet, and then we have Emma's Jaff.
We could pick the book.
But Emma, let me ask this just for no other reason than I don't have any other point to make. So what are you interested in moving on to, or is there a genre that you want to work in, or something else you want to try, or are you just focusing on your day job?
Fantasy romance is my jam, but it is not just the Jaff. I also write SFR and some paranormal and some orc, and I'm slowly coming to the realization that if I want traction in fantasy romance, which is a difficult niche, especially the way I write it with adult heroines, not 19-year-olds, I need to I can't keep dabbling. So I'm like, I've got the SFR over here, and I've got the Jaff, and I've got all these other disparate pen names. I'm like, I'm going to have to come to some really hard decisions about, because there's the day job now, and the day job is the day job.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I didn't want to, as soon as I talked to Jack and we said, oh, let's talk about the publishing plan. Like as soon as we got off that conversation, I was like, oh, but right hand in hand with that is the writing plan. But I don't want to like derail the whole topic, but I do think they kind of go hand in hand, because if you're going to write and have a day job, I also think it's important to have a plan on how you're going to manage that time and not burn yourself out, and
have a schedule.
Yeah, that's the way I got through my first book. I was working full time, so I would, wake up an hour earlier and I'd write for 45 minutes before work, and that's how I got through it, So, and I think a lot of people that seems really daunting, and to me it seemed really daunting, but it can be done. And I think if you give yourself a schedule, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.